When Victoria Reynolds, our self-proclaimed queen of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association, decided to bulldoze my disabled sister's wheelchair ramp, she had no idea the storm she was about to unleash. She thought she was dealing with just another quiet resident who'd back down in the face of threats and paperwork. What she didn't realize was that my sister, Amelia, isn't just another homeowner's federal judge for this state. And if there's one thing Amelia doesn't do, it's back down from injustice. For months, Victoria had harassed us with bogus HOA violations, claiming our city-approved wheelchair ramp was an eyesore that didn't match the neighborhood's aesthetic. I tried explaining this was a disability access issue protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act, but Victoria refused to listen. Instead, she threatened fines, sent warning letters, and even tried to turn neighbors against us. The certified letters arrived weekly, each one thicker than the last, filled with obscure bylaw citations and thinly veiled threats of financial penalties. "James, you have to understand that rules are rules," Victoria told me at an HOA meeting in the community center, her perfect platinum hair not moving an inch despite the ceiling fans working overtime in the July heat. "We have standards to maintain. That ramp decreases all of our property values." She adjusted her pearl necklace as she spoke, a gesture she perfected over her 15 years as HOA president. The room full of homeowners remained silent, afraid to challenge her authority. I'd seen that silence before. It was the same silence that had allowed her to dictate everything from acceptable mailbox designs to the exact shade of Oak Ridge beige every house needed to be painted. Amelia, despite her busy court schedule, had tried to resolve the situation diplomatically. She sent letters clearly explaining federal access laws, even offering to beautify the ramp with designs that harmonized with the neighborhood's architectural style. She'd included sketches from a professional landscaper showing how the ramp could be bordered with tasteful shrubs and decorative stonework. But Victoria wouldn't budge. At each HOA meeting, she'd dismiss Amelia's proposals without even allowing them to be discussed. "The matter is closed," she'd say, banging her little wooden gavel like she was presiding over the Supreme Court instead of a suburban HOA meeting in a community center with folding chairs. Then one day, as I looked out the window at dawn, I couldn't believe my eyes. A bulldozer was rolling into our driveway, with Victoria standing there smiling triumphantly, waving a stack of papers. The morning light caught her oversized diamond ring as she gestured to the operator where to position the machine. I rushed outside in my pajamas, phone in hand, recording everything, the cool morning air sending goosebumps across my skin. "Stop right now. You have no right to do this," I shouted, nearly tripping on the front steps in my haste. Victoria smirked, her lipstick a perfect crimson slash across her face. "The HOA committee has approved emergency removal of this unauthorized structure. This is legal notice." She handed me a pre-signed document with the HOA letterhead, the ink still fresh on the signatures. "This is a blatant violation of the ADA. I protested, my voice cracking with anger. "We have official permits from the city. The mayor himself approved this. HOA rules supersede that," Victoria replied dismissively, checking her watch, a Rolex that seemed too heavy for her thin wrist. "You can sue us if you want, but I think we both know who has the resources to win in that case." Her voice carried that peculiar blend of Southern sweetness and poison that she'd perfected over decades of neighborhood disputes. As the bulldozer moved forward, its diesel engine growling in the quiet morning air, I filmed the entire demolition. The metal blade tore into the concrete base of the ramp, sending chunks of debris scattering across our manicured lawn. Neighbors began to gather on the sidewalk, some in bathrobes and slippers, others dressed for work but pausing at the spectacle. Some watched in disbelief, others in silent solidarity. Mr. Garcia from across the street shook his head sadly. The Thompsons from 2 doors down whispered furiously to each other. But nobody intervened. Victoria had cultivated fear too effectively for too long. But nothing prepared us for the moment Amelia arrived, flanked by her federal security team and arriving in her official capacity. Her black SUV pulled up with a quiet authority that immediately changed the atmosphere on our quiet cul-de-sac. Even Victoria paused mid-sentence, sensing the shift in power. Amelia, in her solemn black suit, wheeled herself through the gathering crowd. Though only 5 feet 5 inches, her presence seemed to fill the entire space. Years on the bench had given her a dignity that commanded attention without requiring volume. Neighbors fell silent as she approached, amid the debris of the destroyed ramp, her wheelchair navigating carefully around the broken concrete. Victoria Reynolds, Amelia spoke, her voice calm but powerful, honed from years of controlling unruly courtrooms. I am federal, Judge Amelia Chun. You are in violation of Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and no fewer than 7 state laws regarding disabled persons' right to access. She didn't raise her voice, but every word landed with precision. Victoria, pale beneath her carefully applied foundation, but tried to maintain her arrogance. Her fingers clutched her designer handbag a little tighter. I don't care who you are, but the HOA has the right. The HOA does not have the right to supersede federal law. Amelia cut in, producing a folder of documents from her briefcase. This is a temporary court order I obtained this morning, demanding immediate cessation of destruction of this access structure. This is also a search warrant to investigate HOA records for systematic discriminatory behavior. She handed the documents to a federal agent beside her, who then extended them to Victoria. The crowd of neighbors began to murmur, the sound swelling like a wave. Mrs. Abernathy, in her 70s and normally so quiet, whispered audibly, "It's about time." Federal investigators were entering the scene, their badges catching the morning light, while the bulldozer operator jumped out of the vehicle, clearly not wanting to be involved in the trouble. His face showed the dawning realization that he'd been pulled into something far bigger than a routine demolition job. "This is a misunderstanding," Victoria said, her voice losing its customary confidence, her hands trembling visibly as she tried to refuse the documents. "I have the committee's signatures. We took a proper vote at an emergency meeting yesterday." She fumbled with her own papers, dropping several in the process. "We'll be examining the legality of that vote," a federal agent said as he approached, his tone professionally neutral, but his eyes stern. "Ms. Reynolds, we need you to come with us to answer some questions." He gestured toward a waiting car, its government plates now drawing even more attention from the gathering crowd. As Victoria was led away, her designer heels struggling on our grass lawn, she turned back to look at me, a mixture of panic and bewilderment clear on her face. Gone was the imperious HOA queen who had ruled over paint colors and lawn ornaments with an iron fist. For years, she had ruled this neighborhood with fear and blind compliance. Nobody dared stand up to her until now. The neighbors watched in stunned silence as she was escorted to the federal car, her social armor suddenly stripped away. Within minutes, more neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by texts and calls spreading through the community faster than any official HOA communication ever had. They gathered around Amelia, each emboldened to share their own stories. Mr. Nguyen, 78, had been fined for growing traditional herbs in his backyard plants his family had used medicinally for generations. "She called them weeds," he said, his weathered hands gesturing in frustration. $300 each month until I removed them. The Rodriguez family was penalized for installing a lift for their veteran father who had lost mobility in Afghanistan. Victoria said it decreased property values. Maria Rodriguez explained, tears in her eyes. Dad fought for this country, but he couldn't even enter his own home without a fight here too. Mrs. Johnson, a widow in her 60s living on a fixed income, had paid thousands in fines for the color of flowers in her Gardena memorial to her late husband who had loved purple irises. "I just wanted something beautiful to remember him by," she said quietly. But all Victoria saw was a violation of the approved plant list. They had been bullied into silence for too long. One by one, They spoke up about arbitrary fines, about approval requests that mysteriously vanished, about intimidation at meetings. The pattern was clear. Victoria had weaponized HOA rules against the elderly, the disabled, minorities, and anyone who dared question her authority. Amelia listened to each story, taking careful notes in her leather-bound notebook, the same one she used for complex federal cases. What had started as a personal attack had become a voice for an entire community. Her expression remained judicial calm and measured, but I could see the anger building in her eyes. This wasn't just about our ramp anymore. In the days that followed, the investigation uncovered horrifying truths about how Victoria ran the HOA. With the help of a civil rights attorney friend of mine, we discovered a pattern. This wasn't the first time Victoria had weaponized HOA rules. In fact, she had been sued 3 times before for pulling similar stunts, and other communities' quiet settlements had kept it all under wraps, allowing her to simply move to a new neighborhood and start fresh. The attorney found sealed court documents showing a history stretching back 15 years across 3 different states. But this time, she picked the wrong house and the wrong target. The HOA's financial records, obtained through the search warrant, revealed something worse. Victoria had been using HOA fines to fund personal upgrades to her own home. In 5 years, she had collected over $175,000 in fines from neighbors, most of it improperly documented. The records showed a clear pattern. Whenever Victoria wanted a new luxury Itima hot tub, landscape lighting, a kitchen remodel, a wave of violations would suddenly be issued throughout the neighborhood. Investigators also discovered that the vote to demolish Amelia's wheelchair ramp had never taken place. Victoria had forged the documents and coerced 2 committee members into signing it by threatening to expose their own HOA violations. One committee member, Terry Williams, came forward with recorded conversations on his phone. "She told me she'd make my life hell if I didn't sign," he admitted, shame evident in his voice. "Said she had photos of my shed that violated the setback rules and would ensure I had to tear it down. Worst of all, we found that Victoria had been conducting a systematic campaign targeting elderly residents, disabled people, and minority families. She had written in a recovered email to a fellow committee member, 'We need to maintain a certain aesthetic for this neighborhood, and that means removing undesirable elements.' The Rodriguez family, with their constant visitors, the Nguyen's with their strange-smelling cooking, and now a wheelchair ramp. It's bringing down our exclusivity. We need to make living here uncomfortable enough that they'll choose to leave." When Amelia called a press conference on our lawn, surrounded by the rubble of the destroyed ramp, the story went national. Local stations arrived first, followed quickly by CNN and other major networks. The image of a federal judge in her wheelchair, backdropped by the concrete debris of her destroyed access ramp, became an instant symbol of resistance against HOA overreach. She revealed the evidence methodically, just as she would present a case in court. Violations of 17 state housing laws, discriminatory practices against disabled and elderly residents, and a paper trail of financial abuse. "This isn't just about a wheelchair ramp," Amelia told the reporters, cameras flashing around her. "This is about the right to live in your home without fear, without discrimination. No individual stands above the law, especially a self-appointed HOA president who uses her position to bully the vulnerable and line her own pockets." Victoria was charged with multiple counts, including fraud, financial abuse, and violations of federal housing laws. Her defense crumbled quickly as more residents came forward with evidence. When she tried to salvage her power with a cease and desist letter sent from an expensive law firm, she walked right into a meeting with the state housing commissioner. It was the last desperate move of someone who realized they were outmatched and outnumbered. The commissioner, already briefed on the situation, simply added the letter to the growing evidence file. But the story didn't end with punishing Victoria. Amelia realized the issue was much bigger. It was about how HOAs can become tools for control and discrimination when there's not enough oversight. This could happen in any neighborhood, she explained to me one evening as we sorted through more resident testimonies. Victoria isn't an anomaly what happens when power goes unchecked. Working around the clock with disability rights lawyers, city planners, and state lawmakers, Amelia drafted a revolutionary piece of legislation, the Right to Home Happiness Act. The bill limited the unchecked power of HOAs, protected disabled residents from discriminatory practices, required financial transparency with annual external audits, and imposed strict accountability for board members, including potential personal liability for discriminatory actions. When Amelia introduced it on the steps of the Capitol, the crowd was electric. Hundreds of people from across the state showed up, many in wheelchairs or with other mobility aids, others holding signs with stories of their own HOA nightmares. Reporters covered it live, and within weeks, the bill had bipartisan support. Politicians from both sides of the aisle recognized a winning issue when they saw one. Who could publicly defend HOA abuse against disabled veterans and elderly widows? In our neighborhood, the transformation went even deeper. The day after Victoria's arrest, an emergency community meeting was held not in the usual community center, but in our backyard, symbolically gathering around the destroyed ramp. Residents who had once lived in fear of HOA violations began opening their doors, their voices, and their hearts. People who had lived next to each other for years, but barely spoke, now shared coffee and stories. The Rodriguezes brought homemade tamales. The Nguyen's shared traditional Vietnamese spring rolls. Mrs. Johnson arrived with her famous apple pie. It felt like a community for the first time in years. The new HOA board, elected unanimously and rebuilt with genuine community members, including Mr. Nguyen and Maria Rodriguez, flipped the script. Their first official act was to commission the rebuilding of Amelia's ramp. Their second was to rewrite the bylaws, with Amelia's legal guidance, to ensure they protected rather than persecuted residents. The Old Violations Office, once a dreaded location in the community center where Victoria would hold court over infractions, became a community help center. Instead of issuing fines, they delivered welcome baskets to new residents. And instead of policing every inch of someone's yard, they started volunteer programs to help elderly residents with home repairs, many of whom had quietly suffered under Victoria's reign, unable to afford both the necessary repairs and the fines for not making them. Amelia's ramp was rebuilt with care and dignity. Local artists decorated it with flowers and soft lights, making it not just accessible but beautiful. Kids played near it, and neighbors stopped to admire it. What Victoria had seen as an eyesore became a neighborhood landmark of sorts, a symbol of the community's new direction. Even the Bulldozer company, once part of the problem, became part of the solution after their CEO personally apologized to Amelia. They offered free ramp installations across the state to disabled residents living in HOA communities. Their CEO even showed up in jeans and a work shirt to help paint Amelia's new ramp, and announced a scholarship fund in her name for disabled law students. "We got caught up in something we didn't understand," he admitted publicly. "Now I want to be part of the solution." Amelia's barbecue a few weeks later sealed it. Neighbors who'd once been strangers were now sharing meals, stories, and laughter in our backyard. The highlight was seeing kids play freely on lawns that were once battlegrounds for HOA fines. Even Mrs. Rodriguez's garden gnomes made a triumphant return, this time multiplied into a whole whimsical village that the neighborhood children adored. The collection of colorful figurines that had once earned her monthly fines now drew visitors from blocks away, becoming an unofficial neighborhood attraction. And the best part? A new family moved into Victoria's old Hausia grandmother, her daughter, and 3 grandkids. Right in their front yard stood a brand new wheelchair ramp for the grandmother, who used a walker after her recent hip surgery. Nobody complained. In fact, 5 neighbors came over to help them unpack, bringing casseroles and household essentials to welcome them. That was the moment we knew. We hadn't just won against one bad neighbor. We'd rebuild a community grounded in respect, compassion, and shared values. A place where people look out for each other, not just their property lines. In the months following the chaos, something remarkable happened. What began as one neighbor's reckless attempt to destroy a wheelchair ramp turned into a movement that reshaped how entire communities think about power, accountability, and what it means to truly belong. Victoria's downfall wasn't just about a rogue HOA president getting her comeuppance seat. Became a national case study in what happens when everyday people say enough. After the dust settled, and the ramp was rebuilt, this time more beautiful and resilient than ever, Amelia didn't fade into the background. She led. Her new homeowner protection initiative spread like wildfire. Cities across the country began reviewing their HOA regulations, with many using Amelia's legislation as a template. Community leaders from as far as California and Maine sought her out for guidance on implementing similar protections. Even the once feared HOA board in our own neighborhood dissolved into a transparent, neighbor-first council focused on unity instead of punishment. I was appointed to direct the state's Homeowner Protection Office, a new division created specifically to address HOA abuses and protect residents' rights. We were tasked with teaching other neighborhoods how to build community, not fear. Now, I travel across the state meeting with communities, sharing our story, and helping others build fairer, more compassionate neighborhoods. What Victoria meant for harm became the seed of something far more powerful: hope. Our security camera footage now plays in training sessions for HOA board members, showing them exactly what not to do. Amelia's ramp has been featured in documentaries about disability rights and community activism. And every time I drive by the place where it all began and see kids riding bikes freely, garden gnomes proudly displayed, and a glowing ramp welcoming neighbors, I'm reminded that justice isn't just served in courtrooms. Sometimes it's built one plank, one policy, and one neighbor at a time. The once sterile Oak Ridge neighborhood, with its strict uniformity and fearful compliance, has become a vibrant tapestry of individual expression and mutual support. For many of us who've watched neighborhoods change and values erode over the decades, this was a refreshing return to something we feared might be lost: real human connection. The kind we remember from childhoods where neighbors knew each other's names, borrowed cups of sugar, and looked out for one another's kids. Looking back, it's clear that Victoria didn't just underestimate the law, she underestimated the people. What she saw as weakness and kindness was actually quiet strength. And when she tore down that ramp, she didn't just challenge a structure, she challenged the very idea of neighborly decency. But in the face of injustice, this time, decency fought back and won. When unchecked power meets unwavering truth, the world changes not just for one person, but for all of us. That's what Amelia said when she signed the Right to Home Happiness Act into law, surrounded by residents from across the state who had suffered similar abuses. And looking around our neighborhood today, now a place where the elderly live without fear, where the disabled are welcomed, where children play freely on green lawns, where garden ornaments and personal touches are celebrated rather than penalized, I know this wasn't just a legal victory. It was a reminder that at our age, we can still make a difference. We can still stand up for what's right. And sometimes it all starts with a ramp and the courage to defend it.